All right, guys, welcome to Left Seat, Right Seat. We're here with John today. He's a ex-Air Force major, and he's also helped
Lieutenant
with.
Colonel.
Oh, excuse me, Colonel. Sorry, I wronged you, sir.
That's all right.
But he's here, and he's also helped with transitioning vets along the way. So he'll have a lot of information for us, or good information for us, should I say?
Yes.
Yeah, John, would you like to tell us a little about what you did?
Yes, I had a 30-year career in the Air Force. It began on active duty. I went all the way through Desert Storm, like that. Then we had the drawdown in the military, and I moved from the active duty forces to the reserves and became an Air Reserve technician. And I was that for the rest of my career. So almost 8 years active duty. And then the other 22 were as an Air Reserve technician. And then I retired in 2015 here in Warner Robins, Georgia. I was stationed at Robins Air Force Base. And my final assignment was an active duty assignment. It was in the Professional Development and Training Center at Headquarters Air Force Reserve Command at Robins Air Force Base.
Great. Nice. And once you got out, you were helping the veterans actually transition in the TAC program?
Yes. So my last year in the Air Force, I got certified as a coach, professional coach. Went through a year-long, intense training program for coaching. By the way, the reason I got into the coaching was in doing all that training with the Air Force, I saw that one of the missing pieces we had was the follow-on work, which is the coaching. Now, we didn't have that issue when it came to skills training, right? We had on-the-job training, so it was, enculturated that we did follow-on training after people got their basic skills.
Right.
Yet when it came to all the other kind of training that we did, and we did, a ton of it,
Right.
of all kinds, it's pretty much the kind you go to a training event and then everybody go back to their bases and resume their normal life. So anyways, I saw the need for the coaching, so I got that in. And after I retired, I volunteered to help at the Airmen and Family Readiness Center on Robins Air Force Base in the TAP classes, Transitional Assistance Program classes. And they had several others. They had one for entrepreneurs. They had one for the transitioning members that were going into education. So the two that I worked in as a volunteer assisting were the Transition Assistance Program, and it was called Boots to Business. It was for those interested in entrepreneurship. It was a 2-day course that was put on by the Small SBDC, Small Business Development Council. I had to get my acronym right there. Out of Macon, Georgia. Actually, they're part of the University of Georgia system.
What year was this? Because I don't remember it being separated out when I got out for TAP.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Separated out?
There was just one TAP for everybody when I was getting out, so I just was curious, what
were you Air
time frame
Force?
we're talking about. I was Army, actually.
Okay. I do know that at Robins Air Force Base specifically,
okay,
because of the relationship with the SBDC, got it right that time, they came in and did the entrepreneurial 2-day course, Boots to Business. I do know they also had a 2-day course for those going on an educational track, the transitioning members going back to school.
Okay, cool.
And they also had various skill classes like resume writing and a couple of others related to transitioning. So the Airmen and Family Readiness at Robins had about half a dozen courses.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I remember the resume training and that's about all I really remember from my TAP, like when I got out. So there was no helping you to be an entrepreneur or anything else. Mostly when I got out, I think also because when I got out, it was like 2005. They were trying not to let people out because they're trying to get everybody to go back to Iraq. So I'm glad now to see it's a little better for sure than what we had, because all I had was a resume training and a good luck.
Yes, it has evolved tremendously since 2005. So that's the upside of the last, approximately 15 years, 10, 15 years of, the military looking at all the issues surrounding transitioning.
Right.
And now the downside, in my personal opinion, to all of it is created a plethora of information out there. It's almost like the transitioning member is drowning in it. There's so much, everybody wants to help them. And what I found that it can cause is a little bit of, kind of freezing up, and just flowing with the process because there's so much coming at them. So many people want to help them. And what I found with the transitioners and working with them, so for example, the TAP classes would have anywhere between 40 and 50 people in them.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you could generally categorize them, like retiring, ending their first enlistment, so forth, even inside those categories, everybody's situation seemed to be a little bit different. So it quickly became customized to their situation, the coaching that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a one-on-one coaching then?
What I would do is I would speak to the class and I would share a number of things with them. And then I would say, here's what I do. Well, to you, it's free. And then I would go sit in the back of the class for the first day. It was a 5-day class. And they would come talk to me on breaks. And we would have conversations. Sometimes, I'd give them a card. And we would set up appointments. So I would say over the 3 years that I did it, probably about a dozen of them took me up on it. So that's not very many out of that many transitioners.
Right.
And that's just the way it rolled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there any commonalities between people that you saw, like things you saw or challenges you saw a lot of the time? Between the people you were dealing with, I guess?
Mm-hmm. The commonality was more on the emotional side of the transition.
Okay.
It ran a spectrum. You had those at one end of the spectrum who had what we referred to as a soft landing upon their transition. In other words, they were leaving the military and they're going into very already set up circumstances for them. For example, what they might look like is they retire and they go into a civil service job right there on base.
Sure.
Or, they retire and their wife has a great job and they're going to go back and they're going to pursue whatever passion they have, go back to school, maybe just go fishing for a while. Mama's bringing home the bacon. So nice soft landing for that bunch. Now, the other end of the spectrum were the ones that were having to leave and had no plan. It could have been a medical board.
Sure.
It could have been they didn't pass their fitness test after, multiple tries. It could be any reasons. It could have been some emotional reasons. So you had a spectrum. But when I say the common denominator for all of them, even for the soft landers, I'll call it, instead of fear, that might be a little bit too strong a word, although there was fear. Uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
The reason why is and you can relate to this, I'm sure, readily. They're leaving an environment that they're very used to. That's for all we go through in the military, there's some certainty associated with it, right? The military is going to do everything they can to attempt to take care of you. Sometimes imperfectly, but they're there, right? Doing whatever the military needs to do to take care of its members. And when they're transitioning, typically what's at the root of the uncertainty is they left the civilian world for however long they've been out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going back to it, and they've changed, and the civilian world has changed. Even 5 years produces a lot of change now.
Right.
I was just having a conversation the other day. It wasn't with a military member, but you guys might like this. It was with a millennial talking about the millennials. They're basically your 20-somethings and 30-somethings right now.
Sure.
Talking about the next group coming up, Generation Z. as they call it.
Oh,
right?
you know what? I don't know if I've discussed Generation Z ever. What are they like?
Well, what I was actually being related to what this individual was sharing with me was even in the short period of time between the millennials, being born 20 to 30 years ago, and Gen Z around 20 on down, is the technological changes has already created a little different upbringing. See, probably for us, we look at them and we lump them together, right?
Right.
But even that short period of time, it's like what was mentioned to me was like they've never grown up without knowing iPads. Since before they could even talk, they had, computer technology in their hands, in their cribs and everything. The millennials were saying we weren't quite like that. We still it came up pretty quick, iPhones and all this other stuff, but there was still a little bit of, a thing going on where heavily into sports, all the parents putting them in the team sports and the travel teams and all of that kind of thing going on, which still does go on. But her point that she was making to me was even in the short time between millennials and what's now being called Generation Z, the technology had evolved so much it was a different cohort group, a different impact. Mm-hmm. And her concern was she was going to have to deal with them as their supervisor in time. And she's an entrepreneur. So hiring inside that and so forth. She already had concerns. I know in a lot of the coaching I do, I'll just say this and let you go back to asking me questions. A lot of the Generation X have talked to me in one form or another about the struggles they have supervising and being millennials. And it can get quite entertaining at the time from them. But hey, the millennials are now getting their due because here comes Generation Z. And
there's always a new generation.
Yeah. Right. And by the way, they're starting to matriculate in the military. They would be your 18 or 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds.
Right.
In the military.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I know the striker controls, the gunner controls are modeled after a Xbox controller, if not exactly an Xbox controller. So
yeah,
that gun
there you go.
You're playing Xbox. So
that's trippy.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
So like, what would a lot of guys and gals when they're getting out, when they came to you, John, like, what would you guys discuss? Like, you'd ask them if they're having a hard or soft landing, or what would you focus on for them?
Well, as a coach, what I would do is get the entire context of their transition. So I would listen. I'd ask a question, a little bit of small talk would, connect. And then I'd say, well, tell me what's going on with your transition. And then I'd shut up and let them go. And of course, I could ask questions as they're going along if I needed clarity. I'd set that ground rule with them. I'm going to let you talk, and I'll only interrupt if I need to clarify something for myself. It's unclear what they're saying. Or I needed to ask a question like say a little bit more about that, or go a little bit more into that. So the key was a lot of listening up front. The reason why it's a coaching principle is you cannot coach someone if you can't get inside their view of the world, how the world occurs to them. Because we can't coach them from how it occurs to us. We have to coach them. We have to be very clear on how it occurs to them. So what I would find out, this is where the customization came in. Because each individual's situation was different. They could be very close in age, same sex, same service, but their contexts were different. So I'd have to listen a lot. Once I had the context, then I could start to ask even more questions, probing, and getting them to talk, because a lot of times, well, here's another coaching principle. The answer already lies inside them. They just can't see it yet. Okay. There's something constraining their ability to see it. It could be fear, worry, anxiety. If it's emotional, it could be a little confusion about all these services that are being offered to them. They've got all the pamphlets in their hand and all the book. It could be anything. So a lot of listening, a lot of clarification, a lot of context, and then starting to probe to see if we could discover the answers that were already inside of them. Because the answer is in there. We just got to distinguish it together. So I do not tell anybody what to do. Now, if they will, occasionally they'll ask me for my opinion or my advice. I will do that when they request it.
All right.
But really, it's powerful to see them see it for themselves. And then you can help them, co-construct with them an action plan. And just as important to co-construct with them the feedback loop or the accountabilities. The reason they're for it, because once they get outside of the coaching session, working on their transition, they're going to have what I refer to as breakdowns.
Right.
Things are going to upset them. Things aren't going to go right. This, that, or the other is going to happen. And then you work with them to work through that breakdown, whatever it looks like, create a breakthrough and get them, if you will, back on the playing field and back in action around their game plan. And with that dynamic going on, they will perform. It's very analogous to a sports coach. Let's say like a professional football coach. The professional football coach, let's say Belichick and Brady, we'll use that as illustration. Belichick is not just there on the practice field with Brady and the rest of the Patriots. Where is he on Sunday? He's right there on that sideline. He's not on the field. He can't play the game. But he's just as invested in the game that they're, Brady and the Patriots are playing as those players are. The entire coaching staff is. So that principle follows suit in the coaching of the transitioning military member is co-create that game plan, and then we both play the game together. What that might look like is during the week is a stream of text or messaging back and forth. If they hit a breakdown, they can tell me, John, I need a few minutes and everything. We get on the phone and we'll talk. Whatever's necessary to cause them to get back on the field empowered and get back in action, moving toward their ultimate goal, which is, a successful transition.
All right. No, that sounds great. And for I want to say the individuals, but for most of them, how, did you really get them empowered, and how did you inspire them to get back on the field?
Well, it could be various things. If it's emotional, the empowerment is going to be shifting the context of that emotion. So, for example, if they're afraid or anxious, it's working through that and shifting it to where they see it as, oh, this ain't so bad after all. I can handle this. I'm a leader. For example, they put in some resumes and they thought they were going to get interviews and they didn't get called back, or, that whole thing with trying to get the interview. Or they went to an interview and they didn't get called back. So after a couple, 3 times of that happening, their confidence takes a hit. That's when that emotional thing kicks in. So there I'd be re-empowering them to recontextualize what had happened, see it differently, and then we create new actions. Now, if it's not emotional, what it could be is something like they may not be fully aware of certain things that work for them. For example, a typical thing would be, let's say their LinkedIn profile. They may not have had a LinkedIn profile, or a very sparse one. Why is LinkedIn important? Because, hiring officials are going to go take a look at that in Facebook, right? Because it gives them insight into the individual. So we would talk about their LinkedIn site. I'd share a few things, and now I'm not a consultant telling them how to create a LinkedIn site. I get them present to the need for it, and then I'd say, take a look at mine. We might look at it together, and they'd go through mine carefully. I'd point things out to them, and I'd say, now you would like to start constructing yours where you have a good picture, for example. A lot of them would have a silhouette, not a picture on there.
Right.
and how to list their jobs and so on and so forth, So not constructing their LinkedIn profile for them, but giving them enough insight and then putting them back on the playing field and say, go to it.
Mm-hmm.
Start creating it. And then I'll take a look at it when it's ready. Text me when you're ready for me to have a look. Okay. So that'd be an example of something practical in the coaching.
I think that's important, the social media aspect of everything. And employers going and looking at all of your social media beyond Facebook, beyond LinkedIn, might be some people might want to clean that up before they hit the tap process, or at least before they get out.
Because it gives an impression of who you are. See, as you well know, we have a plethora of social media. So it's not just Facebook anymore. It's Instagram and Snapchat and so on and so forth. And I did notice this, by the way, with some of the females, military females that were transitioning. Facebook would be fine, but then I'd swing over and take a look at Instagram, for example, and some of the pictures, I would say you might want to take a look at those. The party pictures, some of the girls all together, being young women, giving that, that facial look, to the camera, the innuendo look, I'm trying to be very clean with this. You got what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd say, well, you may want to look at that, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of it is because what's socially accepted in their peer group,
mm-hmm.
To their bosses might not be so. So they need to go scrutinize all that stuff. And, they don't have to be, you don't have to be a total prude about it, but it's just anything that's questionable, pull that out of there,
Yeah.
Gosh, any other tips like that? Just along as part of an action plan, right? I guess social media is one of them. You got any other big points that you would hit on with them?
Well, the whole thing with the resume writing, there's 1,000,001 templates for resumes and a lot of ways to go about doing it. Okay. A lot of formats and a lot of mindsets around what makes an effective resume. The thing that I would share with them about their resume, and this is now very well understood in all the transitioning information that I've heard, is just to get you the interview. It's the interview that's going to make or break you. Okay. So with the resume and whatever strategy after writing it that they pursue, like calling or whatever, the company, is you want to create a desire, interest on that part to talk to you further. Okay. And of course, I'd also say to them, we want to be really honest on your resume. Now, we're going to put your best foot forward. Okay. But we're not putting stuff on there. We don't take credit for stuff that they didn't do. You got to be real careful with all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd ask them which references they wanted to use, character and so forth. And then, they would feel good about their product that they create, right? So they work on it and I'd review it and so forth until finally we said, yeah, this looks pretty good. And then, I coach them around the interview process. And, they learn some things about interviewing in TAP, right? The types of interviews, the panel versus single interview, single employer interview, how to dress, some of the younger ones, you still have to bring that up, right? They can't go in there, the way they normally socially dress. Because some of those things can trigger bosses. Like too many earrings, for example, too many rings on, different colored hair. Not judging any of that. I'm just saying, we'd have to look at that for the interview. But the critical thing in the interview was, and we would mock this, we'd role play it, is for them to get used to the interviewers. I'd hit them pretty hard from different angles, throw them off, much like a simulator when they train a pilot, they have the scenarios. Like if it's a panel interview, I'd have the one panel guy that was, very skeptical of them. Then I'd have the other panel guy that's the softball, the good old boy or whatever, create different things. And the most important thing, what was underneath all of that, was to raise their confidence level. So when they went in there, they felt like they'd already been there to some degree. Okay. And I had several of them come back to me and say, oh my God, it happened very much the way you said it would happen, you know? And that was always a good feeling because they felt really good. And then, of course, that raises their confidence even more because they did well. Now, that doesn't guarantee the job or anything, but see, stuff like that needed to be coached. Mm-hmm. And it could be anything in their transition that they come up with. You know, sometimes it would be something you're not expecting. For example, their home life situation, you know, or, you know, their significant other and issues around that. And I'm not talking about, you know, being a counselor or anything like that. That impacted their transition. One member's still in the military. One's getting out and wants to go to school. It could be all kinds of things. That's what I meant earlier on by the context. They each have their own context. Mm-hmm. And the coaching has to be customized to that context. And the coach needs to get very clear on that individual's context. Otherwise, you can be off. You cannot treat them all like they're part of a stereotypical group because they aren't. There may be a lot of similarities, but, you know, they're all different, every single one of them.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I'm just thinking like how, I'm trying to think how to put it, but like how, you know, how successful do you think the newer TAP classes actually are comparatively, I would say?
Well, the TAP classes, in my opinion, okay, first of all, I'll say something positive about them, is that the DOD, you know, down through the services have been working on developing them over the years. Mm-hmm. So they keep refining the TAP classes, which is a good thing. All right, continuous improvement.
All right.
The issue I saw with TAP is, and I've already alluded to it indirectly through what I was talking about, the customization. The issue is it tends toward one size fits all. Okay, so you put 40 to 50 people in a room, or whatever the number is in particular TAP classes services. And, you know, the military's approach to training, of course, is, you know, they have the PowerPoint slides and they'll do some breakouts. You know, they have the flip charts in the corner. They'll do some paired sharing, whatever training and teaching methodology they're using. The issue was, though, that they cannot seem to bridge, and it's probably not set up for it, you know, the one-size-fits-all to the customized approach. And they'll be the first to tell you they can't do that. Now, they'll try to follow on a little bit that if the military member will come to them with a private appointment, the members in the Air Force's case, Airmen and Family Readiness Center. Mm-hmm. But many of the military members don't do that. And my personal opinion on all of that, why they don't fully utilize the services, I think at some level they're intimidated by it. There's some level of denial going on that I really am transitioning. All right. And maybe they don't want to feel like they're going to get help. You know, they should be able to do it themselves. They're a big boy or girl or whatever. Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, just like my presentations to the entire classes, it was a small percentage that took advantage of it. All right. The vast majority, you know, went on and handled it themselves, whatever that looked like.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that sounds great. Jeff,
John, did you ever deal with preparing for USA Jobs and trying to get stuff on there, doing any of that?
Well, I was familiar with it.
Okay.
And again, in the TAP classes, they would pull all those up, a number of the websites that have them listed up there. And they would get some coaching, some training on that. I personally never did work that with them. One thing I did work with them, and, you know, again, these web-based resources, was a coaching program called Betterati, which was free coaching. And what they do is they serve as a clearinghouse where they can go on Veterati and, do a little profile on themselves. And then they'll send them, here's a suggested set of potential mentor coaches for you. And they could, look through the little profiles and then select one if they chose, or they could get another set. But the idea was, for me to them, why I shared that with them, was I said, look, you can use me, or about this. If you want to go use them, or, you're not around me here, because, physically, eventually they leave the base, right, in a transition.
Yeah.
So they would be aware of that resource. But USA Jobs, I did not get on them, but they did talk about it in TAP, and they looked at it. They looked at quite a few websites. Again, it was part of that one-size-fits-all, the PowerPoint presentation. There would be a slide with like 20 websites on it, and they would, the instructor will work through the slide talking about this, that, or the other site.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that was interesting at Robins, I'll say, is, and many of the transitioners were not fully aware of it, right across the street from Robins Air Force Base, they opened what was unique to Georgia at the time, because the state of Georgia put it in. It's called Vector. It's a Veterans Employment Transitioning Center.
Mm-hmm.
And Vector was staffed by a lot of retired individuals from Robins Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did over there was they brought in particularly the trades to do technology training and trade-based training. For example, truck driving and a number of other things. And it was right across the street, and a lot of transitioning members didn't know about it. TAP eventually started making sure they knew about it. Because Vector only opened up about 2 years ago. And I was looking at Vector. I knew some people over there, that I knew back in the Air Force. We were talking about it, and I got pretty familiar with the available resources that they had over there. It wasn't just trades and technology training. They had like VA information. I got something from Vector on VA that I didn't get from my TAP classes. So that was additional.
That sounds cool. Just one question: is Vector? Do you know if it's like nationwide, or is that just in Georgia?
I don't know if it's expanded beyond Georgia. It was as far as I understood it, it was the state of Georgia working through the colleges that the names escape me, the technology-based colleges.
Okay.
And Georgia seeing a need. Georgia's a fairly veteran-friendly state, so up at the higher levels up there, they had concern about their transitioners. They had concern about employment and other things. Typically what gets the news is the PTSD and the wounded warriors and all, and understandably so. We have that. But most veterans are, we're relatively healthy mentally and emotionally and so forth when we transition. But the state of Georgia, as I understood it, was getting concerned because of homelessness among the vets, unemployed for long periods of time, and all of that whole realm of, veterans that it bothered Georgia that their veterans, state residents, transitioning from the military were not landing on their feet very well. So they went ahead and built this Vector Center in the middle of the state and made convenient to the entire state. They didn't stick it up in Atlanta. And it's used pretty extensively over there. And a lot of good things come out of it. Now, I hope the other states follow suit, because I thought it was a great idea.
It sounds amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, Google it and check it out.
Will do.
All right. We'll have to
VECTR. Warner Robins, Georgia.
What did you say? VECDR, Delta R?
T, Tango.
Sorry, Tango, Romeo.
Yeah, VECTR, Vector. Warner Robins, Georgia.
Typing it out now for later research. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, yeah, I think that's all the time we have for today, John. I appreciate it. I finally got this going. Took a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad we can get it going, and would love to have you back on, later on if you're willing. So, be great. Sweet.
Okay. Well, you're doing a great thing. Help them out, because there's nothing like a veteran helping a veteran.
Right.
And
Really.
It's true.
We are always that's one thing I've become present to in 4 years of retirement, the veteran community. And I'm on a number of pages, for example, on Facebook group pages, Veterans of the Cold War, for example, and so on and so forth. And what you find is that we are a tribe. And it didn't matter what the rank was. It didn't matter what the service was. It didn't matter the length of time. Everybody supports one another, at least conceptually, and they can have each other's back. So, for example, just going on these Facebook group pages and saying, hey, anybody know about, I heard Georgia has a vector center. We got anything like that in California?
Right.
And the vets will start answering those type of questions for them,
Yeah.
Sure.
the community.
Nice.
So, yeah. So
Good
keep
point.
encouraging them. It's
Got to take care of
positive.
each other.
All right.
We do.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Nice. Enjoy your retirement, sir.
All right.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you. All right.
All right. Take care.
Please,
Talk
thank
to
you
you later.
guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Left Seat Right Seat. If you liked what you heard, just go ahead, hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. And come back next week for another episode. And also follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all your other podcast venues. All right, thanks guys. Have a good one, and we'll see you again later. Bye.
See ya.